44. Seagroves rolled the lamb over again and swept down over the smoke-shrouded field. The environment was no longer as target-rich as before. Though we could see the IR signatures of dozens of targets, it was becoming increasingly difficult to tell the living from the dead. A steam-driven vehicle had such a significant heat return that a burning one was actually dimmer on the screen. There was no use hitting those destroyed or abandoned, so we switched from IR to motion sensitive. At least now he'd be able to tell what was moving and what was not. He checked the fuel readout and noted that soon he would be down a third of a tank. All the aerobatics and high power runs were sucking up his fuel. He pulled back on the joystick and let the lamb rise in a gentle arc. Time to break off. The land mechs could deal with the remnants of the Takuda force. He was heading home. Nice thing about flying was that you could do your job and be home by dark for a shower, a hot meal, and clean sheets. Let the ground pounders deal with the stragglers. Takuda, meanwhile, stood in the woods and watched as the rabble that had become his force streamed by. Some still carried their weapons, but many did not. One recent refugee from Amatukaze came to an abrupt halt in a copse of trees and began to fire his weapon at his former comrades, probably in hopes that he would be mistaken for a member of the victorious troops when they arrived on the scene. Takuda raised his laser pistol to put an end to the little treachery, but he couldn't find the heart to pull the trigger. Instead, he walked quietly up behind the man and disarmed him. The trooper offered no resistance, just sat down heavily with his back to the tree and began to weep. Takuda secured the musket, patted the man on the shoulder, and walked away. There was nothing he could do for the sobbing recruit. Andy Holland hobbled past, still nursing a wound from the previous battle, but now with an injury to the left leg as well. The left side of her face had been savaged by some weapon, droplets of blood dotting the space from the jaw to just behind one ear. She could still walk, but only with great difficulty, and only with the support of two tatate helping with her weapon and pack. Takuda would later learn that Holland had suffered 3 broken ribs, as well as kidney damage and a broken right hand. Swollen Horg was not far behind her, also showing signs of battle damage. Something heavy had struck him square across the upper chest, crushing the armor and faceplate of his helmet. He staggered past where Takuda stood rooted to the ground, waiting for the advancing enemy. "It only hurts when I cough," was Horg's sole comment on his injuries. Knight was the last one past. Stopping alongside his commander, he waited expectantly for orders. It was as though he could read Takuda's mind, and he began to prepare their tiny plot of terrain for a last defense. "Keep going," said Takuda, but the Gunso continued to fortify the ground. When Takuda protested again, the non-commissioned officer looked his commander in the eye. "I will stand with you, sir," he said, "or I will accompany you to the rear, but I will not leave you to this fate. There is nothing dishonorable about flight at this time, but we cannot lose you when we need you most." Takuda felt the weight of command slip back onto his shoulders. It wasn't comfortable, but it was familiar. He looked at his section leader and nodded his head. "Correct, Gunso Knight. Yes. You go on ahead and choose a place where we can rally. I'll stay here just a little longer and see what I can do. I'll move from here in 1 hour. Less if the Enclave troops begin to push." The statement was that of a commander taking charge of the situation. Knight saluted and moved off. Takuda found the rally point well after dark. He used the IR glasses to discover the hidden fires in a deep ravine completely covered by the triple canopy foliage. Even the super-sensitive IR devices carried by the Lamb and the Panther would have been hard put to find them except at very close range. By the time the hostile mechs got that close, they themselves would have been seen, and the fires would have been doused. As Takuda came in, he was aware of activity in the undergrowth around him. Dim figures moved to sweep away obstacles and hold back hidden branches. It was the Tatate, looking out for their commander, but allowing him to find his own way home. Clucking voices as soft as the darkness itself. Parker Davood was there, waiting for Takuta to arrive. He had become the complete staff officer. Gone were the days of independent command as enjoyed by a dropship commander. Now he thought in terms of the unit rather than himself. Not only had he been able to cobble together the first piece of mobile equipment, but he'd also managed to build additional ones from parts scrounged on the battlefield. His talents didn't seem to stop when the battle started. Even during the retreat, with the situation falling apart all around him, Davood had found the time to secure a desk, 2 chairs, a cot, a cook stove, and a can of coffee. Where the coffee had come from was complete mystery, because Takuta knew that the last of it had been consumed weeks before. Yet there it was, and now a hot cup of dark brew was waiting for him as he entered the tiny camp. Davood reported that Ariaki Sine was dead, and Johan Miranda with her. Sine had died at the SRM launcher position when the Panthers PPC finally obtained a target lock on her. Miranda had had no business being there, but he'd convinced the Tatate assigned as his personal servant that he could be of some value with the weapon. The two had died as the last missile was firing. Dana Lost, gripping to the very end, had stood against the forces of the Enclave until it was too late to withdraw. Complaining that he would never have placed himself in that position, that he would have pulled out long before, he charged a block of musket and bayonet-armed infantry, firing his laser rifle from the hip. Still complaining, he'd been swallowed up in the melee. Robert Fullerton came to the fire to report the last of his refugees. Out of the 500 at the start of the day, fewer than 200 remained. Where the rest had gone was a mystery, but he had his suspicions. There had been fewer than 100 in the armed forces, and some of those were accounted for. The main losses had been among people manning the main line. Most of them, suspected Fullerton, had drifted back to their enclaves when the retreat began, probably disenchanted at the prospect of having to actually fight for their freedom. Interestingly enough, it had been the most vociferous, the most aggressive talkers who had disappeared. Small loss, Fullerton commented. Even the Tatate ranks had thinned. Dakota reported that the survivors of the original tribe were still with him, but there had been defections among the newcomers, especially those from furthest away. They had been the last into the group, and perhaps they'd decided that the trek had been in vain. In any case, they were gone. The reports in, the staff members fell silent, each one harboring his own thoughts of what daylight would bring. Our choice, as members of the Draconis Combine Elite Strike Team, said Takuta, breaking the silence, is quite clear. It is less so for the rest of you. We have the honorable way of liberating ourselves from the dilemma. Our honor is important to us, and we know that to die in battle for a greater good is to die well. We have established our position, and now we must die by it. We must remember that we will not die unremembered or unsung. Those 47 warriors made the ultimate sacrifice for their lord and their honor. We can only do as well. The Dest team will stay here and finish what we have started. Those of you who are not of Dest, and that means you, Parker Davood, are not invited to attend the ceremony. Stoney's silence greeted the announcement. What could be said to a man who had just announced that he and his compatriots were about to commit suicide? There was an uneasy stirring among the company as though someone had just stated that he was dying from a terrible, horrible, deadly, and highly communicable disease. They all wanted to be somewhere else, but none was willing to break the bond of loyalty. The man who fell from the sky with fire will continue, said Dakota softly. It has been this way for as long as I can remember. It will remain that way for those who come beyond. Takuda looked at the face of the little aliens, his bulbous features lit by the fire. There was a long silence, and then Takuda said, "What about the others who fell from the sky with fire? Tell them the story I heard last night." Dakota rose from his crouched position and closed his eyes. He began to rock back and forth as he spoke. "When the first men came from the sky with fire, there were many Tatate who hid in fear. And well they should, for those who came had sticks that brought death. The Tatate were driven from their lands and enslaved. Thus it was with the men who came from the sky with fire. But there was another group that came from the sky at the same time. Their machine fell well away from the others, and it did no harm to the Tatate. It is said that at this place, beyond the blue mountains that lie on the land like an Aoe mist, there is another group. It is said they will rise to defend the Tatate and then lead them to a land that is open and free. In this land, the Tatate will be able to live in peace with those who came from the sky with fire." "Is it true, Dokodo?" asked Takuda. "We think so. We thought you were of the same group. The legend says that there will be those who will lead us to those we know not. You are the ones to lead us to that spot. You cannot stay here and die." Takuda shrugged. "I think, Dokodo, that you know how I feel about that. I don't want to become part of your legends. Being a Dest commander is responsibility enough for me. I would act as your advisor and your leader, but I don't intend to become part of your legendary past, present, or future." "I fear, Shosa Yubari Takuda, that you have no choice. No matter what you choose, some in the tribe have already made that decision for you. Now you must decide whether to accept the task they would give you, for better or for worse. Already you are part of our legends." "So, now I have the choice of dying here in an attempt to defend you, and thus give you the chance to escape. Or I can lead you out while the mercenary and enclave forces destroy those too sick, too old, or too injured to move quickly. And what do I do with the refugees from the enclaves? They are also part of this equation, and I have heard nothing from them." Robert Fullerton had been listening to this conversation in silence. He took some time to answer. "As far as I'm concerned, and I think I speak for the rest of my people, we'll go with Takuda wherever he goes. I think I'd like to try Dokodo's idea. Let's go to wherever it is he thinks the other humans are. I like what Takuda said when I joined up, and that dream hasn't changed. I'm willing to let him lead us." Takuda felt the weight of command pressing down upon him. Now he would be responsible for the Dest team, the Tatate, and the humans on a trek to some place only the Tatate knew of, and only that from a legend. But it was something. It was a chance. It was a future that would continue for more than one morning.